Well, Thailand's leader Prayut Chan-o-cha has told Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that the country will hold a general election next February. During a meeting in Tokyo, the Thai Prime Minister confirmed the timeline of next year's election despite repeated delays. He also thanked the Japanese government for its support and cooperation on trade and economic development issues.
Thai government is doing its best to reorganise a stable democracy and is planning to have a general election next February. I thank Prime Minister Abe for Japan's continuous understanding and support. I am also pleased that the Japanese companies have built their trust in our business relationship. I promise not to disappoint the people and the companies in Japan.
Meanwhile, there is speculation that the Prime Minister will contest the much-delayed national election. Since coming to power, the retired Royal Thai Army General Officer has been criticised for consolidating political power in his own hands, cracking down on protests and curtailing civil liberties. The coup in 2014 followed months of intense political deadlock between Yingluck Shinawat's government and opposition parties that resulted in protests and clashes. We spoke to Dr. Greg Raymond, Research Fellow at the ANU College of Asia and the Pacific, about why he may run.
Bev, look, I think we can go back all the way to 2016 when there was a constitutional referendum, and one of the questions that was asked, alongside asking people whether or not they approved or disapproved of the Constitution, was would they agree to an unelected Prime Minister? So the fact that that question was there, I guess, gave the game away quite some time ago. Now, the response to that was actually quite lukewarm. Only 58% of Thais agreed to the idea of an unelected Prime Minister, but it was passed. More recently, I guess the signs that we're seeing are cabinet meetings being held in some of the outer provinces, more funding going to some of those rural areas, and also some reaching out by ministers in Prime Minister Prayut's cabinet to try and recruit members of the former opposition party Pheu Thai. All of those things, I guess, lend some credence to the idea that General Prayut might be contemplating a move into politics following the election.
Of course, people remember so well the division between the red and yellow shirts in Thailand. There's always been those two opposing sides of politics. Do you think that Prayut is trying to split that kind of traditional voting system?
Look, the red-yellow divide really emerged as a phenomenon with the ascent of Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. His election, originally in 2001 and then by a huge majority in 2005, really created this division between, I guess, the rural masses, particularly in the north and the northeast, and inner-city elites. And really, I think that General Prayut has tried in some ways, and I don't think has succeeded, to try and heal the very bitter divisions that grew up over the sort of 10 years between the first coup in 2006 and the next decade, and to now 12 years after that coup in 2006. That divide in some ways is still there. There's still signs that the north and northeast will support Pheu Thai, which is the party that Thaksin created and is still affiliated with. I'm not sure that General Prayut is going to be able to transcend that completely. On the other hand, the elites who supported his coup, they still are very concerned about a return of Thaksin. So in some ways, I don't think those divisions have completely disappeared.
Talking about the return of possibly Shinawatra, we've also got the other side with Abhisit Chachua. Is it clear who may lead those two sides of politics?
No, not at the moment. As I understand it, neither one of those parties has nominated who they would like to be their candidate for Prime Minister. Now, I know Pheu Thai has a meeting at the end of this month. I think they will nominate at that stage. But the new election system is going to ask every party to put forward 3 candidates that they would be prepared to have as Prime Minister. So we should be seeing nominees coming up fairly soon.
Greg, you talked about the sort of constitutional and legal issues that were raised earlier. Are there booby traps, so to speak, within those changes and some of the new laws for any new government that might be elected other than potentially one backed by the military?
Yes. The way in which the new constitution has been drafted is that it will mean that any new government will really be walking a tightrope. There are numerous mechanisms for removal of a Prime Minister or any parliamentarian on reasonably, I guess, subjective grounds. For instance, the Constitution would allow someone to be referred to the Constitutional Court on character grounds or ethical misconduct, and it would only take 10% of either one of the lower house or the upper house to make that referral to the Constitutional Court. And if the Constitutional Court thought there were grounds to that allegation, then they would have to step aside. That could be the Prime Minister. There are other mechanisms. For example, the Constitution mandates that there will be a 20-year national strategy. Now, that national strategy has been legislated now, and there will be a mechanism to ensure that future governments are seen to adhere to that strategy. If they're seen to be deviating from it, again, this is grounds by which they could be referred to a constitutional court. So all of this means that I think we are heading towards weak and unstable government, unfortunately, regardless of who actually attains power. And that also goes for General Brayout himself. Even if he forms a government, the way the Constitution is set up, I don't think he could necessarily be immune from no confidence motions.
Greg, how are the Thai people responding, A, to his leadership and B, to the prospects of perhaps never really returning to a proper democracy?
Look, just in terms of what is a proper democracy, I guess in Thailand, when you look at the history of democracy there, since 1932, when they moved from being an absolute monarchy, the military's been in control for 59 of 86 years. That is 7 out of every 10 years. So Thai people have had to put up with a lot of military governments. So I think Thai people, certainly by all the really good research that has been done, prefer democracy. I think they would like to see a return to an elected government, but it's very hard to get a steer on exactly where they will go with their voting. There's a lot of, I guess, suspicion about some of the polling that's been done. I don't think people think the polls are necessarily reliable. General Brayout, I do not think he's resented by all of the Thai people. I think he is seen as hardworking, reasonably upright, honest, but I don't think they think that he's the best sort of economic manager. And I think they still look at military governments as not being the optimal choice for managing the economy. And the economy has not been growing as well as people would like. It's been trickling, sort of trundling along at around 4 to 5%, and people think it should be growing better than that.
The timing of the election, Greg, what is your sense that he has also possibly raised the idea that it might be a little earlier than predicted?
Right. Well, interestingly, there were some laws passed last month. Now, these laws were always expected to be passed. The Constitution effectively set up a timetable, and subordinate legislation would have to be passed at certain times. Now, that's happened, and we know that the election has to be in the period between February and May. I think it would probably be surprising if it happened before then, because there still needs to be a lot of work done in terms of registration of party members for some of the larger parties. So I think if he tried to pull the election off too quickly, I think there'd be pushback on that. But he might see that as a winning move. But mind you, I don't think it's 100% lay down misère that General Brayout is going to compete in the election or compete for the position of Prime Minister. I think this is partly because even with a playing field which is not level, I don't think he can be guaranteed that he will win the Prime Ministership. It will be a reasonably fluid situation, and some of the outcomes could be surprising.
Fascinating stuff to watch. Good to talk. Thanks, Greg.
Great. Thanks, Bev.